Hola, le saluda René Salgado, presidente de la iniciativa EmpreSomos Centroamérica, dedicada a promover y apoyar el desarrollo de los ecosistemas emprendedores en nuestra región. Los invitamos a conocer más sobre nuestro trabajo visitando empresomos.org. En este espacio que denominamos Conectividad Emprendedora Centroamérica, buscamos generar diálogos relevantes para el fortalecimiento de la innovación y el emprendimiento en la región, invitando a investigadores, pensadores y líderes de acción a compartir sus ideas en un lenguaje claro y útil para nuestra audiencia regional. En esta ocasión abordaremos un tema fundamental para el desarrollo económico, como es el relativo al funcionamiento de los ecosistemas de emprendimiento. Reunimos al profesor Gregory Guéneau para compartir ideas claves derivadas de su artículo Opening Entrepreneurial Ecosystems Black Boxes, publicado en Small Business Economics, del cual él es coautor. Esta presentación se orienta a explorar cómo interactúan las distintas partes de un ecosistema emprendedor, cómo evoluciona con el tiempo y por qué comprender estas dinámicas es muy importante para los interesados en el desarrollo centroamericano. La conversación será moderada por el doctor Carlos Rodríguez, profesor de Estrategia Organizacional de INCAE, quien nos ayudará a conectar estas ideas con la realidad centroamericana y a identificar implicaciones prácticas para las instituciones, universidades, emprendedores y formuladores de políticas de la región. A continuación, cada participante nos hablará brevemente de su trayectoria profesional, luego de lo cual compartirá sus ideas que no, para después entrar al diálogo entre el doctor Rodríguez, con el doctor Rodríguez y explorar más dinámicamente las ideas expuestas por el profesor Guéneau. Esperamos que disfruten de este espacio, lo encuentren enriquecedor y que se sumen a futuras conversaciones en esta serie. Aunque el diálogo es en inglés, los subtítulos del webcast pueden verse en español. Okay, amigos, that's it. Go ahead and you introduce yourself. You, Gregory, what is this? What you do, and what is your professional background? We don't have audio.
Thank you very much, René, for this introduction. Thank you very much, Carlos, for preparing some very nice questions. So my name is Gregory Guéneau. I live in Casablanca, Morocco, and I'm a scholar specialized in entrepreneurial ecosystem, as you underlined, René, earlier. And in fact, I began this research journey in 2018 when I was seeing that some countries in Africa were not competing very well in the area of entrepreneurship compared to others. And it was very strange, but because there was paradox. And then I worked a lot on that, and I want to propose you a first metaphor. Guys, did you ever watched kids playing Lego? You know, it's a typical scene of our lives. And when you watch kids playing Lego, of course, the Lego depends on the kid itself, but it depends also on the availability of the Lego bricks he has around him. You know, for instance, if some pieces are very far from his room, he will not use them. Okay. If he has only one model of bricks, he will only use this one model in shape or color. And if he has just a few bricks, then he will use it. So the complexity, the creativity, the interesting models he can create with his Lego bricks depends on the diversity of the bricks he has under his hand by shape and color, their quantity, of course, and their accessibility. Are there under his hand or not? And if you think like that, you say, well, there's maybe this metaphor is tied to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs act like that. They are more or less creative, but the new venture they can create rely on the availability of resources they can have in their environment, financial resources and non-financial resources. And my point of view is that the entrepreneurial ecosystem is the distributor of those resources, is the creator and the distributor of those resources. when you say things like that, then you say, well, let's have a look at the entrepreneurial ecosystem as a resource provider to entrepreneurs, and to see how the relationship between the actors of the entrepreneurs, meaning incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, fab labs, institutions, university, how their ties, their collaboration can carry the resources necessary for the entrepreneurs. So the collaboration between those actors from a network of value to entrepreneurs. And then the only question you have to ask yourself is, how can we measure this network of value? And what is the interest of measuring that? In what extent can we leverage on that knowledge to act in the entrepreneurial ecosystem to make it more performant, efficient? That's all, you know? So when you say it like that, then you say, well, first I have to list who are the actors of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I have to identify all the actors and their geographic distribution, because at some time, knowing where they are, it can be interesting. So list all of them, which is not always easy, but not so difficult, okay? Then for each of one, you qualify them. So why qualify them? Just to say, well, what are their roles? What are their functions? What kind of resources do they offer to entrepreneurs? Meaning a fab lab maybe will offer prototyping, okay? An incubator will propose mentoring, or maybe ideation workshops, and etc., etc. So each actor has its own value creation for entrepreneurs. Okay, so let's qualify that as deep as we can, which is not so hard. Okay. Then third step, which is more delicate, then you try to understand what is the network of those actors, who works with whom. Okay, do this incubator works with this fab lab? Okay, meaning that we can evaluate the collaboration, the value exchanges they are susceptible to propose to entrepreneurs. So it's not so easy, but it's doable. The fourth layer of analysis would be to do, and then this is where begins the economic intelligence, to do a resource-based network analysis of the ecosystem, meaning that you measure not only the collaboration, but also how the resources I talked about earlier are tied within the network. Meaning, for example, that the incubator offers innovation workshop, ideation workshop, and a fab lab offers prototyping. And if they work together, they can form a value chain about innovation plus prototyping, which is a value chain for entrepreneurs through network. Okay, so we can evaluate that at the scale of the ecosystem to find where the resource accessibility via networks, because of course, if the actors are well networked, it's more easy for the entrepreneurs to access their resources. Yes, and to find overlaps, which resources are in number, where are the structural holes, like what resources are lacking in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and maybe sharing practices, synergies generated through collaboration efforts. Okay, you understand that the interest of that would be to understand the structure of value sharing to the entrepreneurs, which is the fourth layer on 6. Then the fifth layer, it's more interesting, because then you do the value network analysis, meaning that you tie the understanding of this network of values to the spillover, to the result, to the value created for entrepreneurs. I mean, expressed in patents, new venture creation, jobs, etc., etc. And then you can examine the combination of resources, how they form network of values to entrepreneurs, to value chains, construct value chains, how those networks facilitate the flow of the value across various organizations, and to evaluate the network-wide value co-creation made by the actors between themselves, which is very interesting, as you can imagine. And then the last layer would be to evaluate that through time, to evaluate that new government, a crisis, a decision, an economic evolution. How does the entrepreneurial ecosystem evolve? So what is the relationship between governance and the ecosystem? And what is the relationship between the ecosystem shape and organization and the spillover, meaning the economic growth, the new venture generation, the licorns, and so on, which is also very interesting and important. So the organization I funded in Morocco, and now acting in all Africa and possibly in South America, add those 6 layers of analysis to study the competitive advantage of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. When you know about management studies, organizational studies, you understand the power of competitive advantage analysis, and how through network it can be fascinated to analyze that and to provide to all the actors, the policymakers, the main economic actors, of course, knowledge actors like knowledge institutions like universities, schools, etc., and of course the entrepreneurial ecosystem actors, about what would be the best resources to build to your ecosystem. How can we collaborate between each other to make our ecosystem more efficient, to win together? And how can we make that in a way to make entrepreneurs win, and then the nation to win in a competitive landscape, which is, I think, a bit important. So this is what we do at the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem in Africa. We do it at the scope of Africa, actually, and there's 33 countries, and then we're moving soon on 37 and 38 because we're opening France too. And we do it longitudinally. So actually the deepest of data we can have in some countries is from 2008 to now. Some countries, because of lack of data, we can start at 2012, for instance, but it's sufficient to have enough depth of data to analyze the organization, the configuration, the structure of each ecosystem. And this is what we do. We do the 6-layer analysis in 33 countries, and tomorrow more, from 12 to 7 years of depth of data. And we do it at the scale of actually of Africa. This is what we do, and we publish on that. We have a number of awards from research institutions on this research. And if you're a scholar specialized in entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think you will think about it 2 minutes, and you will see that there's a lot of potentials to bring new research in the entrepreneurial ecosystem area. And for policymakers, we know it because we discussed already with a lot of policymakers. It's very interesting to build proper strategy, data-driven strategies for entrepreneurship and growth in each country. Period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gregory. And let's open the exchange now.
Yeah, Gregory, it was amazing that you started actually with Legos. And let me tell you, like, why it's very touching the point to me. I'm myself an avid Lego player, but back when I grew in 1985 or something, I just have a Lego with the total number of pieces were 100, 110. And now I see my kids playing with very, like, you cannot even count the number of pieces but it's basically over 1,000 very easy. And let me tell you a very specific example. Once I made a car with that Lego. My car, which was very rustic, it has two little pieces, two set of wheels, something on the front. It has 12 pieces in general. My kids with the leg with what the Lego said they had, I made something similar, and it took more than 70 pieces. And it was a much nicer car. So I think that's a very powerful metaphor to understand entrepreneurial ecosystems, like seven times the power between one and the other. And so a good, well-functioning entrepreneurial ecosystem has many pieces. A very rustic one has very simple, and the output, you have to imagine actually what is the nice car. In the other, you can actually see it. So now let's go to how this looks in reality. Like, can you give us an example based on all the work that you do of an ecosystem that has all those pieces, even though it's like even ideally in emerging markets, that's working well, and particularly like identify those pieces, which are the pieces that make the ecosystem work particularly well on your experience.
Yeah, so it's very interesting what you say, Carlos, because in fact, here you point out the difference between northern countries and southern countries. Northern countries, resources everywhere, lots of resources. So we don't, of course, it's nice to have that kind of tool because for some application, it's very nice. But why this framework didn't appear before? Because the research on entrepreneurial ecosystem was mainly focused on northern countries. So scholars were focusing more on macro level economic data on entrepreneurial ecosystem, quite, very high level data. And there was no need for something else because resources are everywhere and entrepreneurs has just to bend to find the resources they need. But in Southern America or in Africa, the game is not the same. Not at all. The resources are not as, available as they are in other countries. They are not in enough quantity, quality, accessibility like in northern countries. So the question about that in those countries, in Southern America, in Africa, and maybe some other southern countries, is very important regarding this approach, because in those countries, they have resources, but specific resources, not everything, but they want to optimize what they have. They want to make available what they have already in a way that is comprehensive for entrepreneurs. We know this resource is there. We can access to this resource and we can play with it to build our new venture. And this only knowledge doesn't exist. See what I mean? So the question of that is important. And the other point is when you have the knowledge about the available resources and when you have the knowledge about their accessibility through network, then you can work first off on how to optimize your network to make your actual resources more accessible for everybody. And then to target the development of new resources that are good for your territory. Okay. So now, example of what we saw. We on all our our framework, we manage on 7 countries. Actually, it was just a study done recently. So North Africa and Gulf, to understand the combination of those resources. I told you non-financial resources because we focused on non-financial resources. Why? Because we assess that when a new venture is interesting anywhere, anytime there's money, there's financial resources for them. So it's not the issue. The issue is not the financial resources. It's the non-financial resources. So we looked at the non-financial resources, and we looked at, through network, how those resources were accessible in network of values. And we tried to understand which combination of value bring result, bring ROI for the territory. Okay, ROI meaning more new ventures, more growth, etc. And we found out that, and it was when I will have said it, you say, oh, yeah, of course we know it, but did you know it before? So in those 7 countries, we found out that the resources that were critical for growth were prototyping, testing, and contractual, low IP, legal support for entrepreneurs to protect themselves, to protect their venture, to protect their new project, and your venture, their innovation. The 3 resources, when they're in the ecosystem in sufficient quantity and well exposed in the network, they carry value for the territory. So this is one example of result. When you have capacity to make a project real, prototyping, when you have the capacity to test if the idea is relevant, testing, and when you have the capacity to provide to entrepreneurs protection through legal services for entrepreneurs, then when you have those 3 things, you empower your ecosystem, you empower your nation.
One question, like I see you're not referring to demand conditions, and that is to me interesting.
To demand?
The demand, like the existence of a market, and because like in my mind, I'm referring to you're saying that the formal institutions, the legal system, and then some like knowledge in terms of the prototyping and testing. So those seem to be like the foundational like blocks, like the 3 or 4 Lego blocks that need to be there. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
That's
I understand, but I would answer with with a tricky answer, with a with a magic answer. Talk about demand to Mr. Ford before he created his first car. Demand was not there. Nobody knew that they would need a car. Okay, so the demand for entrepreneurs is one ingredient, but not the most critical ingredient. See, because some entrepreneurs create demand by their innovation, their new services, the creativity they bring to the market. Okay, so I think the demand itself is not a critical point. The critical point is to create an environment, a sandbox environment, when you can create a lot of new ideas, new ventures, new stuff at low cost, and see the ones who will foster.
Okay.
See what I mean? Because when you manage a portfolio of innovation, a portfolio of ventures in VCs, it's like that. You bet on 20 new ventures and 1 succeed. Okay. So of course, demand is not a small point. I don't say that. I don't say that demand doesn't have to be considered. It has to be considered, but it's not the critical point. The critical point is to make available the critical resources for the Lego players to play, to create new models, new ventures, new things, new offers, new services, new products. And of course, to have an ecosystem that allows this new stuff to exist and to be performant. Most of them will fail. We know it. It's science. We know it that most of the creator will fail. But we want to create enough new ventures at the lowest cost possible for everybody, including for the creators themselves. We don't want them to destroy, to burn themselves through the creation process, of course, because someone who failed in the new venture maybe will succeed the day after. So if it's totally burned through the entrepreneurial process, it's not good. Okay, so that's why the ecosystem, the policymakers, has to create an environment that makes possible this sandbox.
Good. Can I add another question there? Because and this is important, and I guess Renee will be with me supporting this question. Like at EmpreSomos and the previous conversation we talk a lot about the role of the universities aligning and fostering all the emergence and strengthening of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. With the experience that you have in Africa and the north of Africa, particularly on more like technologically oriented ecosystems, would you say like and a strong universities or research programs are like a necessary condition, a must-have condition, or they can be overcome somehow and
Not everywhere is the same way. For example, there are some countries like Qatar who has a very, very strong university ecosystem, etc. And some countries do much more with less, like Madagascar. For instance, compared to Morocco, Madagascar does 3 times more entrepreneurial creation than Morocco. 3 times, 300%. Okay, it's huge with less. So, of course, there's a lot of parameters. There's the culture, a lot of regulatory stuff, the atmosphere in the country to push young people to create, etc., etc. So there's a lot of parameters, but in some countries we can see that with weaker macro environments, the entrepreneurs, the young people do more. And we saw that the ecosystem is better organized. So we think that there's correlation between how the ecosystem is framed, is organized, even if it's smaller, with the final result. We also believe that knowledge institution has to be strongly tied to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is not always the case. In many countries, knowledge institutions are quite in their, ivory tower. Like everywhere, it's not. I don't point out, but more or less. But we have some indication that in the countries where the ties are stronger, where the confidence is stronger between economic actors and knowledge actors, the final result is better.
So you're talking a lot about that. The most important, perhaps, is not the structure, but the interrelations, the network effects. I like you to go deeper on and I remember that from your 6-stage model when you move to the network of actors and the knowledge that is transferred between actors. Can you refer a little bit of more? And ideally, if you can refer to specific examples where that network's working particularly well with, if there's any like best practices that you were
so for instance we did what we call a trophic analysis, okay, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem network between different countries. Trophic meaning all the birth stage non-financial actors, again, with birth stage financial actors, mature stage non-financial, mature stage financial actors, etc. So the big typology of actors, 6 typology, number of states. And we did a test on 6 countries, and we saw that some configuration of the ties between the type of actors, not the actors themselves, the type of actors, some configuration were creating more entrepreneurship than the others. Okay. And then we did a paper presented to Babson and was accepted to Babson on goats and crocodiles, meaning that some ecosystems are goats, they provide milk to entrepreneurs, and some ecosystems are acting more like crocodiles. Okay, so why did we say that? In fact, we saw that in those ecosystems there's a practical support actor, like Fab Labs. Fab Lab is a practical support actor. It does a very precise service to entrepreneurs. Incubators, for instance, are not that kind of one. They're just supportive actors, and they do more or less. Okay, incubators. And we saw that when there was strong relationship between practical actors and incubators, the result was better. We saw that when incubators were more focusing on practical actors than with financial actors like institutions, the result was better. Well, it's a bit strange. Why? Because in some ecosystem, incubators and accelerators are more tied to the institution to get money from them. But finally, they take more resource for themselves rather than for the entrepreneurs themselves. Probably they eat more from the institution for themselves, to support themselves, rather than to support entrepreneurs themselves. So that's why we did a distinction between goats and crocodiles, because we saw through the configuration of this ecosystem that typically the actors were more about fundraising for themselves rather than for entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And we see that in the how the actors are distributed and how they build their ties and etc. etc.
So just to summarize, and this reminds me a lot of a book by Adam Grant, a Wharton professor on givers and takers. So I like so you're suggesting that ecosystems with actors behave more as goats, like providing support to the entrepreneur, tend to fare reasonably better than ecosystems where the support actors have a more predatorial, like
yes
basically
and it depends on a lot of parameters which are specific to the nation, to the territory, of course. But what we see also is for a policymaker has to understand, of course, that incubators, etc., has to live. They have to have resources to live. Okay, so they have to take that in consideration, but they have to do a policy not to make them live, but to push the entrepreneurs themselves. Of course, they will bring resources to incubators, accelerators, but they have to do it in a way that benefits first to the entrepreneurs before benefiting to the incubators and accelerators. So, for example, we suggested here in Morocco to emit vouchers. Okay, to entrepreneurs. So the entrepreneurs receive vouchers because they present, their venture deck, and depending on the deck, they receive vouchers to go to Fab Lab, to go to co-working space, to go to incubator, etc., etc. Like that, the competition is reversed. It's not the incubator accelerator that choose their target. It's the entrepreneurs that choose the place where they are going to get some resources for their project. See?
Yeah.
It's the other another way to manage the issue and the problem. But it's specific to a territory. You have to analyze the dynamics of collaboration, the dynamics of value creation, the dynamics of services and resources offered to entrepreneurs, how it works, to propose a specific policy to help a territory to thrive, you know?
Right, and this assume, sorry to interrupt. This assume a more like a hands-on approach from a designer, a policy institution that sometimes makes certain that the rules are not predatorial but more supportive.
Yeah. It has to be done with, you know, if you do another metaphor about industrial strategy, industrial, you know, you're a company, you're an industry, and you do strategy. You need external analysis. So you do your external analysis with your pestel and so on. You do your external analysis, and you have to do your internal analysis, and then you build your strategy. Okay. So the observatories and institutions that provide economic-based knowledge are more or less external analysis.
Mm-hmm.
What we propose here is to, as a complementary, to have an internal analysis on your entrepreneurial ecosystem. And then with the two layers of analysis, external plus internal, then build a proper strategy for your ecosystem. Because then you have the complete story about the external analysis, your internal analysis, and then you do your choices, your scenarios. You, of course, consolidate your scenarios with complementary analysis, and then you build your strategy and your action plan. In fact, what we propose here is just that. We say, well, our framework is about internal analysis. It's not the overall analysis. It's the internal analysis, which is a complementary tool for policymakers to understand you know, the global picture with external analysis tools and the internal picture of the ecosystem to build comprehensive, efficient strategy for their ecosystem. This is what we propose, not more, not less.
I see, and now like moving from the build up and to a more dynamic in time period. You studied many ecosystems, and some are like in the very initial period, some more developed. How do you see the trajectory? Is there anything like a stage model or a dynamic
Yeah.
model?
So
What do you
what?
have to do first? What happens first? What comes after? And what is a healthy development trajectory and a healthy development trajectories? How do you see that?
So I published a paper named Sticky Ties, and the name is quite appealing because it says that during time, in all the ecosystem we saw yet, the structural ties between the actors stay the same shape over time. Okay, shape is persistent.
Okay.
Okay, the shape of the network is persistent, which is good and bad. Okay, but we saw also that on the resource level, so on the actors level, how the actors are tied together, the shape stays the same. But how the resources are in complementarity and distribution through networks, it moves a lot. Okay? So it's very interesting to see that if you see that there's a big problem of shape, of organizational shape of your ecosystem, it will be probably a bit difficult to pivot your ecosystem to a more efficient shape. Okay? But challenging, but doable. What is more easy is to say, well, guys, you're organized like that. We understand that you will not change your habits. But you have to develop that resource, and you have to develop new partnership to make sure that those resources are accessible through network. This can be a fast track to support an ecosystem. When you have identified which resources, what are the structural holes in terms of resource distribution in your ecosystem, then you can say, well, guys, you will have benefits, fiscal, whatever benefits you will have. You will have benefits if you develop this, that resource and make it available through network. And then you offer the new Lego bricks that the entrepreneurs need. Okay. And it has to be tied to economic complexity. I don't know, Haussmann and so on, the economic complexity perspective. Anyway, it's the specialty of your territory. Let's say your territory is specialized in cotton, producing shirts in cotton. So you have all the value chain about, extracting the cotton, refining the cotton, make it usable for to do t-shirts, and then you have factories to do t-shirts, and then it's so efficient in terms of industrial process and so low cost that it's very competitive globally. Okay, so your territory is very good for t-shirts and cotton t-shirt. Then you have a value chain, a network of value about t-shirt in cotton in your territory. Of course, you will, if you think about entrepreneurship, you say, well, I want to support my already excellent territory. So I want to help this territory to stay excellent at the global stage. So you will create, a concentric circle around your core value of second level skills and values, and try to consolidate that in order to elevate the complexity of your value chain. Okay, the economic complexity. So you will do that. And of course, you will give the chance to create new excellence sectors in your territory, depending on your analysis. Then what are you going to do regarding the ecosystem? You are going to target the development of resources for entrepreneurs that are aligned with those objectives.
So that's an interesting topic for my last question. And here you walk us through the stages of developing one entrepreneurial ecosystem. But what about effects, that spillover effects? Well, the term is not used for this, but something that is like maybe extra ecosystem collaboration, something that is stemming from one existing ecosystem that can support the emergence of additional ecosystems in it.
Of course, yeah.
Do you have examples that you can refer to?
Yes and no, because maybe here it goes where we didn't go through because we have the data, but those analyses we didn't go through those analyses specifically speaking. But with the data we have already and the knowledge I have on those data, I can tell that we can see in some ecosystem that there exists clusters, specific clusters within the ecosystem. With a specific topic like agri-tech or fintech or whatever, okay? So those clusters exist within the ecosystem. And one of the questions we have sometimes is this cluster well organized to support the excellency of agri-tech in our territory? So are the actors well connected? Are they aligned with the excellency objective of the territory of the nation? First question. Second question, if it's well shaped, can we leverage on that cluster to create other clusters? Which more delicate question, because sometimes if you leverage on that one, you can weaker that cluster to create another one which is not so efficient. Okay, so we can see that. You can also watch through our data if there's an influence from a foreign nation in your ecosystem, because through network you can see the influence of this or that guy, etc., etc. So you can see a lot of things, and the question are an endless question we can address for the ecosystem. But I really understand, and I acknowledge that your question is very important. Is how with that kind of data can we strategize?
Right.
In fact, can we strategize? In fact, those data are made for strategy. So then it's work. It's opening the data. Maybe the one who has created the data, like me, I don't understand this country or that country because I'm not there, and I don't understand everything. So it's collaborative work with people of knowledge about their countries, their specificities, and to make those data talk about what does it say about this territory, and how the ecosystem is shaped and framed, and what can we do with what we have? How can we make this more efficient, to regulate some deficiency, maybe, and etc. So see, it's like value chain analysis in an industry. First you put the numbers, and then you put the people together, the responsible of each line of production together, and say, well, what can we do with that? Can we do better? That's all.
Thank you very much. Renee, I don't know if you have
Just one brief question. See, one of your colleagues has explored the relationship between local entrepreneurial ecosystems and ecosystems outside the realm of the local ecosystem.
Can you rephrase your question?
Okay. See, the ecosystems are often, your local ecosystem may be related to other ecosystems that are in the environment of that ecosystem. Right? So, is it possible? Because sometimes what happens is that you may have a relatively weak ecosystem, let's say in one actor or one Lego or set of Legos, but then you go to the external one. Have you considered that in your
Yeah, but
research?
it's in natural science. Okay, in natural science, when you address an ecosystem, you focus on the ecosystems of the lions between each other in the safari,
Uh-huh.
and you have to consider also the ecosystem of water, the ecosystem of vegetables, of many other layers you have to consider to have a deeper analysis. This is by construction an issue, not an issue, but an element of analysis by construction, because ecosystem science, it's about that. But sometimes you don't have all the data. If you consider the ecosystem of the lions, maybe you don't have all the data about all the other elements of the environment. Sometimes, okay? You have to do with it. It's like every situation of analysis, there's things you don't know. But then you have to bring around the table people who can provide some interesting insights in order to understand the phenomenon. Say why do in this subregion, why do lions extinct? Why do they disappear from this region? We don't understand. Okay, let's bring experts of that region and to say, well, why do lions disappear from this region? Okay, so you have the data, you have a lot of things, but some phenomenon you cannot understand at first sight. Okay, that's why it's a multidisciplinary approach, and it's a collective analysis approach that has to be done about ecosystem. Otherwise, you fail.
Okay. I don't know. Okay, go ahead. Do you want to say a few words to conclude, Gregory?
Yeah, first, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to open those doors, those, you know, mind doors to you and your community, because I understand what we are doing is quite novel in the ecosystem science. We know that there's a lot of potential, but this potential has to be, you know, leveraged locally, and people has to, you know, look at the data, familiarize themselves with the data. What do they mean for the ecosystem, etc. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to open perspective in Latin America about this approach of entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is, I think, very well shaped for you know, southern countries, and will probably make possible some success for the countries and the territories who use that kind of tool to grow. Thank you very much.
No, excellent. Thank you. Carlos, you want to say a few
Yeah,
words?
no, well, first, thank you for starting with that amazing Lego example, because I think it is great for us to compare uh, like apples to apples, and whenever we had to try, like we're trying to uh, do comparisons against like northern nations with much more resources, you always lack in several dimensions, and when you lack so much, you don't know which ones are necessary and must have, and which ones are like nice to have. So, like with your research line and with the specific insights you have provided us, we know about what has worked on your region's experience, and what is the primordial soup that is necessary for entrepreneurial ecosystems to emerge. So I learn a lot. Thanks so much, Gregory, for sharing your research project with us. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, both of you, and I hope you will be able to continue this conversation in every format you want.
Absolutely. Let me say a few things in Spanish just for our audience, okay? Bueno, muchas gracias a los profesores Guéneau y Rodríguez por esta interesante presentación y además un enriquecedor intercambio de ideas con implicaciones interesantes también para el análisis de ecosistemas emprendedores en la región. También agradecemos la atención de nuestra audiencia y si están interesados en estos intercambios de conocimiento, los invitamos a seguir nuestra página en EmpreSomos en LinkedIn y a suscribirse a nuestro canal en YouTube. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.